Hello, so today we are going to do this problem, which is a part of Leetcode daily challenge, zigzag conversion. So the problem says we get a string like PayPal is hiring, and then is written in a zigzag pattern on a given number of rows, right? So in this form, like, so you can see PayPal is hiring like this. So basically, some sort of pattern, zigzag pattern like this, okay? And you can read it. So the way we want to read it is once we do the zigzag pattern, we read each row, okay? So first this one, that's what we have here, and then this one, and that's what we have all the way to here, and then the last one here, okay? And the goal basically is to get this string in this zigzag format, and we want to convert it to, and then when we want to read it in a row by row fashion, right? So let's take a look at another example. So for the first example, which is this one, PayPal is hiring, right? So we read the first row, second row, last row, right? So we get this one. And then for the second example here, it's PayPal, right? So the first 4 characters are in the first column for the zigzag, and then after that, this one. So yeah, basically until PayPal is hiring is drawn. And so we read it, the first row is PIN, the second row is this one, and so that's what we have here, and then the third row, you get the idea, right? For one letter, just one, right? And the constraints are not too big actually. It's 10 to the power of 3 to 10 to the power of 3. So this tells you something by there is sort of a for loop on the characters of S, and a for loop on rows should work fine, right? So sort of when by number of rows should work. Okay, so let's see how we can solve it. Okay, so let's see how we can solve this one. So we have this from this example, the second example here. So one thing you can notice is this, we draw it in the zigzag pattern, right? So like this, and then we move up. We do a zigzag like this, and then we go down again, and then we go up, and then we go down, right? So it's sort of this pattern, right? And what does this pattern actually means? Like in theory, it's just, the original string, by the way, is just PayPal is hiring. Okay, ring. So if we take a look at this, what is this actually? This is just, if we do it by column, it's just doing PayPal. So 4 first. By the way, the number of rows here are 4, right? So it's just taking 4, right, in the normal direction, right, from 0. So let's say this is 0 in the number of rows, right? So from 0 to n-1, the number of rows minus 1. So this would be 0. This is r minus 1. Let's call this r. And then we go up, which is from 3 all the way to just before 0, right? Yep, so just before 0 at 1 here. We can consider the up ends here, and then we start down from the 0, okay? And so basically the pattern is actually just like this, right? So from 0 to r, let me just correct this a little bit. So from 0 to r minus 1, and then from r minus 1 to 1, and then from 0 again, so we include this 0 in the column down to r minus 1 again, and then we keep going until there are no more letters. So we stop here at 1. Let's just make this super clear. So we stop at 1, and then we start from 0 down. We do that again to 1, start from 0 down, until there are no more characters, right? And this is the exact pattern we are doing. And so we can actually just follow this, except we will need, what do we need for this? For each iteration, basically, we keep the index going until we fill the 2. Basically, each time in the iteration, we fill a pattern of up and a pattern of down. So with this pattern here from 0 to 3, and then this pattern. So for each iteration, we fill this. For the second iteration, we fill this, and we keep going like this. Okay, so how would that work? Well, let's run it on an example. Let's run it on this example actually. Let's do it on Let's do it on this here. So what will happen is that we'll start an index at this position, 0. Let's call it, in our case here, just I. So we'll start I there, and then we will need something to hold the values, right? And so let's call this just a string of rows, right? That will have each of the rows here. So it will have each of these, okay? And so let's say, so it would have 0, 1, 2, 3, and we'll fill it, okay? Okay, so we start with at P, and what we need to do is basically, while we start at a specific row, right? We start at row 0, right? And we want to fill each row from the column. And so while that row has not reached the end, which is smaller than R, and of course we want to also make sure we don't exceed the number of letters, right? Because, for example, in this case, we don't want to proceed until R-1. We want to stop here because there are no more letters. So we want to make sure that the I we are doing here is smaller than n, which is the length of the string, okay? So for that, what do we want to do? Well, for each letter, we want to add it to the proper row, just like we are doing in the zigzag here. So we counter P, it needs to be in row 0, so we add P, and then we increment, we need to increment both our row to go to the next one in the column and the index, right? So here what we need to do is just say the rows. What we did here is the rows at row R, we added S at I, right? And then we want to increment R to go to the next one, and we want to decrement the we want to increment the I here. So I moves to the next letter, and now we are at row 1. So now R is equal to 1. Let's just hold that. So I equal to 1, R equal to 1, right? And so we add A here, we move again, we are R is equal to 2, and so we add Y here, and then we advance I, and now our R is 3, and our I is 2, 0, 1, 2, 3. Sorry, our R is, I is 3, and so we add P. And so you can see this actually matches exactly this, right? And then now we reached 3, right, which is the end of this. So we stop here, and we need to go to the other direction. So that's the other loop. So the other loop needs to start, because we already filled this position, the other loop needs to start here. What is this? This is just R-2. So it needs, the R is the number of rows. So we need to start at R-2. And we need to keep going until we reach this position, which is 1, because this position is part of the next row going with the indices going up. And so we will have to do while R is bigger than 0, right? We want to stop at 1, so we just do bigger than 0. And of course, we always want to make sure we don't exceed the number of characters available, right? So that's important. So here, and I is smaller than n. We want to do the same thing we are doing here, except, so exactly, copy, put here, except what does need to change, because we are going down in terms of like the indices of the rows, we need to decrement this here, okay? We need to decrement R, okay? And so now let's continue. So we move our I to A here. What's the value of R? The value of R is R-2, we said, which needs to be, R is 4, so -2 is 2. So our row is 2, and our I is 4 now, right? Because we advanced it here. And so we place our value A in row 2. And then we move to, so here we just concatenate. So you can think of this as just having like this. And you already see this is starting to be like, this is starting to match what we have here, right? And so we continue here. We decrement R to 3. Sorry, I made a mistake here. This is I becomes 5, and this here becomes 3. -1, sorry, becomes 1. Okay, so the next letter is L. And so L, where do we place it? We place it in row 1, right? So row 1, we place L. And now you can see still this matches what's in row 1, right? So we continue again. We move I here. We are at I. We need to place it in row 1. We need to place it in row 0, right? But since we reach 0, we exit here. And so we go back to this one. We go back to the loop again. So this would be for while index is smaller than n. And so we go back here. We need to place it to row 0. And so we add it here. This is I, so we place it here. Okay. And then we need to increment row. So row becomes 1 and 6. And so I moves here. So we are at S, which is this one. And so we want to place it in row 1. And so we place it in row 1. And you can see this still matches what we have here. And then we move I. So we move I here. And we move R up. So 2. And now we need to place A in row 2. It's A or H? It's H, sorry. It's H from hiring. So we place H here. And then now we increment R. So R is equal to 3. And I is equal to 7. And now you can see R is 3. And so what we need to do is move I here to I. And we need to place I in row 3. So we have I, place it here. So we add it, okay? And you can see this also matched this, okay? I think we can stop now. Feel free to run it on the entire example if you want, but you get the idea. It should work fine because each time we just fill the rows going from 0 to r minus 1, and then we fill them again going from r minus 2 to 1, and we keep doing that until we don't have any letters anymore. Right? So pretty straightforward actually. Now let's implement it and make sure it passes our test cases. Okay, so let's implement this solution. So what we need is, we said we need to have I that traverses S, and so it needs to be the length of S. And then we are first going to go from like 0 to r minus 1, right? So this is basically, you can think of it as up. And then after that, we go from r minus 2 to 1, right? Because 0 is already done by this. So this is down. And so we start here. And we want to keep going until r minus 1, so smaller than r. And we always don't want I to exceed the string. And then here, we want to go from r, we said r equal to n minus 2. And we want to keep going until 1. So we can just say bigger than 0, right? And so what do we need to do here? Here we are going up. And so first we need to initialize our rows list. So this is going to be just a string for each row, range of the number of rows. So just to match what we saw in the overview, let's call that r. And then here we need the row. We want to add the character at this index, right? And then we want, since we are going up, we want to increment our rows. And so since we want to go to the next character because we already used this one, we want to increment I. And then here we of course want to also add the string. But this time, since we are going down, we want to decrement. Okay? And then we want to, of course, increase the index always. Okay? And then here, we will get a list of the strings for each row. And since the problem once you read each row, but you combine them, right? So we just want to combine the strings for each row. So to do that, we'll just use join for the rows. And that should be it. So if we run this, looks like there is, we need, yeah, just to specify that we are not using the index there. Yeah, we didn't define I, sorry about that. And looks good, let's submit. And this passes test cases, right? for time complexity, no matter what happens here, even though you have multiple loops, we won't do the maximum number of iterations we will do is the length of the string, right? Because each time we will place a string, and each time we'll limit by I smaller than n, right? So this is O of n actually. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You can do this differently if you want to sort of use direction and not have two while loops. So actually, let's try that. So what do you need for that is you just need to keep track of the direction, because if you look at the two loops, the main difference is the direction of how we increment row, if we increment it or decrement it, right? And then we just want to switch that direction when we reach r minus 1 or when we reach 0. That's exactly what we are doing here. So let's actually just comment this and apply that. So we need the direction to tell us if we are going up or down. So let's start with going up, right, by incrementing by 1. So each time we know we want to do this. And then we want r, we want to do r plus 1 or r minus 1 depending on the direction, and that's just adding the direction. And now when do we switch direction? You can see here we switch if we reach r minus 1 or if we reach 0, right? So here we can just check if r is equal to 0 or r is equal to r minus 1, we want to switch the direction. And switching is just if it's 1, so basically minus 1 if the previous direction is equal to 1. Otherwise, if it was equal to minus 1, we do 1. And this is just multiplying by minus 1, right? Because if it was minus 1, we multiply by minus 1, we get 1. If it was 1, we multiply by minus 1, we get minus 1, right? So that's changing the direction there. And so that should be it. We want to return join rows like we did. Actually, we still have it, so let's just copy it over up here. And you can see this is a lot simpler. And because of minus 1, what will happen for r minus 1 is that we will decrement by 1 and we will get r minus 2 anyway, right? The only thing is that, let's try it. We need to still increment I plus 1 here. Okay. Looks like, let's get rid of this first. And run it. Okay, let's see, why is r not defined? Yeah, I didn't define it, so let me just define it here to 0. Okay. Yeah, so this is basically for the case where a string is equal to, let me remove this one first, just so that you can see. So it works for other cases, except for the case where you have only, let's say, one row. Then this solution won't work properly because you don't have a next row to go to. So for that solution, so this is the only disadvantage of this short solution, is that if you have only one row, you need to treat it specially. And so for one row, there is nothing to do, just return the string, right? And so we do that. But you can see it's a lot shorter. It's one loop, and actually we can even make it more simpler by saying we don't need this while loop. We can just go through the string like this and remove the I and remove the need for an I here. And at this point we don't need n either, and so we just need r in direction, which starts out at 1. Yeah, this is C. If we submit this, and this works, right? So pretty straightforward here. Once you get the first iteration, you can improve it and make it look like this. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for today's problem. Please like and subscribe, and see you on the next one. Bye.